Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Beats. I am your host, Kelly Kennedy, and I am very fortunate to be able to share my tribe as I travel across the globe and meet incredible scientists and doctors and all sorts of practitioners and continue to expand that tribe to help engage and encourage and empower you to learn how your body really works. Because what we know from our heart to yours is that you have all the innate wisdom inside you to heal, and that our job is naturally oriented therapists, medically enlightened doctors and specialists available here at Not Meds Global. The Beats podcast is about helping you understand that you have that power inside and what you need to do to help engage it, to constantly upregulate your ecosystem. Thank you so much for being part of our community. If this resonates with you, please go ahead and share this episode. We are always open to your comments and your questions as always. And welcome back to this week's episode of The Beats. Welcome back to The Beats with Kelly Kennedy, and I am very excited today to have Dr. Bernard Straile on as our esteemed guest. You've heard about Dr. Straile from Dr. Carolyn Leaf and Ian Kennedy in regards to the incredible tool that he has created, but his traditional background is more in chiropractic care. And he became a chiropractor here in the state of New York, where he resides up in Syracuse, New York. But his German background and his precision thinking in regards to how can I make this better and faster, I think has developed into a beautiful system where he teaches people the show method. He certifies wellness practitioners, and he has created this amazing bioenergetic biofeedback quantum device called the IMAET, Immune Modulation Allergy Elimination Technology. And so we welcome Dr. Bernard Straile to the Beats today, and we are going to dive deep into how the body really works with Dr. Straile. Welcome.
Hello, Kelly. Yes, glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit about how your journey started for those that don't know you, don't know how the IMAET started, and why the bioenergetic field kind of stood out for you, if you wouldn't mind going through that. I don't know the story, so that's why I'm asking.
Well, okay. Well, it's kind of, a lifetime of learning, later on this year, I'll be 70 years old. So it's been going on for close to 70 years. So, energy medicine has been sort of touching my life somewhat from the start, so like, let's start with homeopathy. So my parents were using homeopathy, when I was a kid, and basically what homeopathy is energy medicine. That's why the medical field says it's a hoax, because there's no chemicals in it. So how can it work? Well, as you know, anybody that has used homeopathy, if you can figure out the right remedy at the right doses, it does miracles. It's unbelievable. And all it is energy and frequencies, similar to what we're doing today with the computer, except back then it was a little bit more tedious. But that sort of was my introduction into the field of energy medicine, let's call it. I don't like the word medicine, but into energetics, right?
Yeah.
And then, fast forward a couple of decades. And then of course, I learned muscle testing and kinesiology, and these are all reflex techniques. There's so many different ones, and they're all good, and you can become really powerful and figure out a lot of things with those techniques. But you have to employ your intuition and develop intuition, and as a practitioner, that some people are just so detached from their bodies and actually from life that they don't even know that every time I eat this, it makes me feel bad. They don't pay attention, and it's well, I'm the opposite. At this point in my life anyway, I'm hypersensitive, I said, oh, this doesn't make me feel good. Okay, I'm not going to eat that anymore, and so on. So then in the So connecting energy medicine or energetics with technology has been going on since, let's say, the 1950s, 1960s. Dr. Voll was one of the first ones that everybody may have heard of, a German medical doctor that went to China, learned acupuncture and said, well, this is too complicated for me. You know, I need I need some technology to help me find the right spot where to put the needle and so on. So he developed, you know, EAV, electroacupuncture, after Dr. Voll. And that kind of was the start. And ever since, it's been growing and growing and growing. And then came, you know, again, fast forward a couple of decades, and we're talking about quantum biofeedback, where now we have technology that can actually measure and crunch the numbers for this energy flow within our body, you know, within the meridian system, actually. And as it turns out, this chi energy that we're actually analyzing and working through represents cellular communications. You know, cells don't communicate through the nervous system. The nervous system and the nerves are a separate communication system that has nothing to do with cellular communication. That happens through these meridians, and it's important to realize that and to acknowledge that. And so the brain, you know, has to coordinate its activities as well through that system with the rest of the body. And then, of course, now we're off to the races. Now we can actually, you know, determine frequencies for all the different genes, which there's just hundreds of thousands of them. And we can actually analyze how they function energetically, you know, which is huge, which is huge. And yep, here we are.
Well, I want to break some of that down. I want to unpack some of that, because you gave like a, you know, for those that are a novice, that was like a condensed version of a PhD program. And for those that are not, that maybe have heard of Dr. Voll's or maybe heard of EAV, they appreciate the framework of which you've put energetics into. But I want to back up to the words frequency and energy. And I agree with you. I don't like the word medicine either, because I'm not a medical doctor. I don't practice medicine. I am a scientist and I work in the field of energy. And everything, you know, everything's a frequency and energy. So can you talk a little bit more about the EAV, or maybe not the EAV, but just the concept of meridians, acupuncture points, and energy and frequencies, and make that a little more simply understood, you know, going back to like some of your modules that I've watched where you're teaching like, hey, we're all part of the universe, in case nobody knew. By the way, we're all connected to everything else. This just in. I mean, I love when I first watched your first module and I was like, okay, he spent an hour explaining that we're connected to the rest of the universe. But I think this is an important point that people miss.
Well, yeah, and you know, yes, indeed. I mean, I don't know how much everybody is connected to, you know, those are the better parts of what's going on in the world, is like, you know, the telescope that we put into outer space so we can watch, like they just launched a new one. So I'm very much, I come from an aerospace family. Like my father was an aerospace engineer, my brother is an aerospace engineer. So I'm very much into that. And I don't see that as a waste of money at all. I see war as a complete waste of everything, including treasure. Big waste and tragedy, really. But this is so if you follow that, it's quite fascinating. So of course, yes, we are part of the universe, but life here on Earth, you know, functions. So life functions at the interface of the environment and the DNA. Okay, so it's an energetic process. The DNA has the knowledge on how to manage all the things that we have to deal with that come from the environment, which most importantly includes, you know, what you put in your mouth and the air you breathe in and so on. So all that has to be processed, right? And that process is energetic, and So the other thing is life is organized in cellular structures, right? There's single cell organisms like an amoeba or a certain bacteria and so on, but most are multi-cellular structures, including trees and grass and flowers, and everything that lives is organized in cellular structures. And we humans, we're made of 100 trillion cells, right? 100 trillion cells, and in the nucleus of each of these cells is our DNA. And that DNA guides that interaction between the environment and our survival, really. And yeah.
So the frequency and energy in the body comes from the communication of one cell to another cell. And everything is multicellular except for an amoeba. There are bacteria, there's some single cell species, but there are majority of life, which is what, people want to know, what is life? Well, that's what we're talking about. What is life? It's the interface, is what Dr. Straile is saying, between the cellular communication and our environment in which those cells are surrounded, which is the concept of terrain medicine, which I've studied in Germany as well as Ian has for 20 years, going, oh, it's all about the environment that is going to signal those cells and then turn on the DNA that's inside that cell that tells the body how everything should go. It's like the blueprint, if you will, but it can turn on or off those blueprints dependent upon the signal it's getting from the environment.
Exactly. In fact, that's how it functions. It has to turn on and off as needed. And if that works perfectly, then there is really no problem. Then you have no problem. But the fact of the matter is that we all have many thousands of mutations in our DNA. Okay, so I focus on the DNA not in a sense of that it controls everything, because it doesn't. It just manages our life at the interface to the environment. So we have thousands of mutations and variants in our DNA, and that puts us at a disadvantage sometimes, So anyway, so it's kind of on a scale of 0 to 100. If you have a mutation, it can actually, it makes that gene then function 20% less, 40% less, 75% less. And sometimes it makes that gene function even more than 100%, So for example, I have a mutation in a gene that detoxifies caffeine, and it happens to, I'm a fast metabolizer of caffeine. So I feel that as an advantage only because, I can drink a cup of coffee in the afternoon and I can go to sleep at 9 o'clock, no problem if I want to. Well, many people that are slow metabolizers of caffeine, and it's all because of that gene. If they drink coffee anytime after 4 o'clock, they cannot sleep the following night. Okay, and so you have to realize that our metabolism is organized by thousands and thousands of genes. So if you eat a hamburger, for example, it has to be processed. So that hamburger is part of the environment. If something comes from the outside, you put it in your body. So now your body has to deal with it. Okay, now let's say it's all just good, free range, or rather grass-fed beef and an organic bun, and there's no chemicals on it. It's all good. Okay, because that's a whole nother section, is detoxification, if you really want to stress out your body. However, so there's no gene for hamburger. But the ingredients in that hamburger would be like, let's say, animal fat, iron, of course, protein, like different amino acids, and vitamin B12, and so on. And for those ingredients, there is a gene or a set of genes for each of these ingredients. Okay, so the genes that process this hamburger have to turn on in order to process it, digest it, and so on. So those are enzymes. Okay, so each enzyme is controlled by a gene, and if that gene doesn't turn on, you're going to have problems. Like lactose intolerance is a perfect example. You ingest lactose from milk or what have you, And if that lactose gene doesn't turn on, you are, your intestine is going to be very upset and stressed out. You cannot process the lactose. If it turns on, there's no problem. Having said all that, so the really cool thing is because of that fact that the genes resonate with the environment, and genes are resonating entities like a string in an instrument, very much like that. They can be changed. They adapt. They're made to adapt to environmental changes. It's part of survival. It's part of evolution. That's why we're here where we are today, is because over time we have gone through many epidemics before, for example. So each time an epidemic comes around, our immune systems have to learn how to deal with this new, let's say, virus or pathogen. And one of the tragedies about this latest one is that we don't allow this to happen, especially in the young people who are not even in danger of, dying or anything. And we're not allowing them their bodies to develop that. And it's very important it's part of evolution. And we're going to have to do it one way or another. And it's happening, everybody's getting sick anyway, vaccinated or not. So that's all part of the dynamic of the DNA as it adapts to environmental changes.
And speak, if you could, Dr. Straile, about the mutations. You're saying that there's over 1,000 mutations of DNA. Those mutations are not negative mutations, they're just different, is what you're saying. Like you might have, like you said, a DNA that, allows you to metabolize caffeine much faster than perhaps I metabolize caffeine, and that's a mutation, or are you speaking of something different?
Yes, those are mutations. There's thousands of mutations happening in your body every day. So they have to realize that. Not all of them are bad, but a lot of them are bad. So there's functional changes, okay? And so, of course, once you get into bioenergetics, into epigenetics, you realize, for example, that we have hundreds of genes that repair our DNA every day because it gets damaged every day. So this is most important in the context of cancer, because most of these genes have been identified as predispositions to cancer. So if your BRCA1 or BRCA2 gene is mutated and doesn't do a good job repairing your DNA every day, that predisposes you to developing cancer. And it's not just women, it's men too. And for this particular set of genes, because it's the women that made it like popular or famous.
The BRCA1 is in regards to breast cancer.
Exactly. So, yeah. Breast cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer. Yeah. But mostly breast cancer. Yeah.
And so the frequency, for instance, of DNA repair, we know that has been documented. Actually, I have a tuning fork right here of 528.
Yeah.
Just so happens, since we're
I have that one too.
let's just help everybody's DNA real quick. So that frequency will heal the DNA. How do we figure that out, Dr. Straile? Because you are the master of that knowledge right there. I want to know.
Yeah.
How did somebody figure out that 528 is healing my DNA?
Well, each frequency has its own purpose. So there's multiple frequencies like that do that, let's say, repair DNA. So what specifically this frequency does, see, I'm so much into the detail. So what I do with the IMAET system is I don't just do 512 hertz. I do the very frequency of the BRCA1 gene, which is in the software, and resonate that with your body through a treatment, a quantum biofeedback treatment, to resonate that gene up into higher function to overcome, let's say, a mutation. And it's possible, and and the amazing thing is it's permanent and also heritable, by the way. You pass that improvement on, any epigenetic change, good or bad, you pass on to the next generation. So it's incredibly important work for amongst other things, for that reason also. But because of the character of genes as they interact with the environment, we can use that trick of using frequencies, the innate frequencies of BRCA1. Let's just use it for, it's the same with the lactose gene. So it's just a different frequency. So we expose your body to that frequency, and usually it's a 20-minute treatment, right? And resonate that gene through that frequency. It will resonate itself up into a higher level of function, and it stays there. That's the cool thing, because there's a lot of, we have thousands of these things, so you have to treat them, pretty much one at a time. So it's a good thing that they stay there. Otherwise, you'd be just going on and on and on and on. But people will actually improve, and it's cumulative,
It is a brilliant system, and honestly, I don't use it every day like Ian does. I get the benefit of it from being treated, but I don't actually administer it like he does, and Sarah, my other practitioner here that uses it. But I want to understand that really well. I want the community to understand what you just said. So if I, let's say, have a BRCA1 gene that is mutated, meaning it doesn't repair itself properly every day, then I could potentially end up with a breast cancer given the environment causing that to constantly mutate without healing, correct?
Well, okay, so the BRCA1 gene doesn't repair itself. It's a gene that repairs other genes, that repairs DNA specifically, So it goes around and it does, it looks for breaks in us, that ladder, that double helix strand, and it repairs as they happen every day in all of us. And I mean, there's hundreds of genes working inside of you and me right now, repairing damage that's just part of life every day. And you can increase it with radiation and toxins and emotional trauma and things like that. But so if those genes are working properly and normal, let's say at 100%, then you have a better chance of living cancer-free than if that gene is mutated and it's only working at 30%. That much increases your chances that one of these genetic damages will result in a cancer developing somewhere.
And so what the IMAET system does, it scans the body, finds that gene is only working at 30%, and then gets it to increase its effectiveness, which what you're saying, it holds that treatment. It's not going to break down again, correct?
Well, it appears that way, yes. Of course, it all depends on the person. Like some folks, then, they go back and they go to the medical system and they end up on medication. And then a few years back, they come back and it's like, oh my God, what happened? Everything, you ruined everything.
Yeah.
you re-damaged everything we accomplished. That happens. But, I believe that's, so as far as the IMAET is concerned, we actually, we can detect low function or high function for that matter, and then put it into a treatment. Like if, let's say, BRCA1 comes up at the bottom of a scan result, I always put that in a treatment immediately. There's no question about it. It should not be low functioning in anybody. And it's a good feeling because, I've helped a little step again today to prevent cancer in somebody to develop. But it's not the gene that repairs itself. It's the gene that actually goes out and repairs the DNA in general in certain tissues.
Because that's the job, if you will, of the BRCA1.
Yeah. As opposed to other genes, their job is to turn on to manufacture an enzyme or stomach acid or antibodies, or these genes specifically, their job is to repair damage of the DNA every day.
And as part of the Genome Project, we now know what the jobs of those genes are and can identify those genes. But back to my other question. So this tuning fork sends out 528, which is also known to repair and heal DNA. How the hell did we figure that out?
How did we figure it out? Well, I do not know, but we're figuring out these things every day. I mean, there's more than one. There's other frequencies, that Yeah, so this is just a general, rather general frequency to stimulate that. And, it's like anything else. How do we figure these things out? How do we figure out these homeopathic remedies and all this? It was actually done with a lot of labor. You used to have to dilute and succuss thousands of times to extract the energy out of a certain, let's say, toxic substance, like arsenicum. And now we just have the frequency of it. We know what it is. We can measure it.
And the frequency, that's what I was trying to get to, is the frequency are measurable. So everything that has a life, that has more, well, whether it's one cell or multi-cells, has a frequency that it's emitting that's a measurable, quantitative, numerical value, correct?
Yes. So that hamburger that you're eating, not the hamburger itself, of course, as a totality, it has an energy, but the ingredients each have energy. So, for example, the energy of iron is easy to see. You just go to the periodic table, there's an atomic weight, and the atomic weight determines the frequency of that iron molecule, or actually atom. And so that's easy to comprehend, right? It's a little bit more difficult with complex structures and molecules such as genes, or especially emotions, because they turn out to have very specific frequencies also, which are extremely effective in using to just harmonize the damage that's done by emotional trauma and so on.
And so with everything having its own unique electromagnetic signature frequency, I'm curious, like an apple, right? So you have green apples and red apples, and within red apples, there's a variety, and green apples, there's a variety, and then there's yellow apples. Are they all within a frequency range that are similar, like minute changes, or are they pretty broad?
Well, it depends how tedious you get about the frequencies, but yes, they would be in the same category. So, for example, when we treat people for metabolic problems, quirks, digestive quirks, let's say you have trouble digesting apples, right? So initially we would just treat apple as a layer, but as it turns out, even so, the vitamin C from an apple is different than the vitamin C from broccoli. It's not entirely different, but it has different character and different qualities. And it's very important to realize that, just how detailed that is, especially when everybody takes these synthetic vitamins, like ascorbic acid. That's not really vitamin C. That's just the general chemical formula for vitamin C that we figured out. So the reason why one apple is green and the other apple is red and just tastes slightly different, those are biochemicals that make that happen, and phenols and such. And we do get into those details, because there will be somebody that says, well, I can eat a red apple, but every time I eat a green apple, I get a tummy ache, So then we actually have to determine the phenol that's in a green apple that makes that problem happen, because that's a very specific gene responsible for that phenol, and it's apparently not working right.
And for
that's
years,
how detailed metabolism is.
The system you've created, and for years, Ian, and I know yourself and so many other practitioners, use these tiny little vials that represented the frequencies, that then they employed their intuition through muscle testing, but they had to be very clear, and it was a little subjective, and it took a long time, like to get through the top 15 or to get through the foundational quirks, if you will, of the DNA. It would take weeks. And then Dr. Straile enters with his brilliant mind and looking at other technologies and was like, hey, we can do this better, faster, and stronger. Look, this is how. So explain, if you would, how the tool, the IMAET tool, is satisfying many different quirks fast, and the difference between what I said earlier before we were officially recording was you took people from the Flintstones, you know, pushing your car with your feet to
Tesla.
Yes, to a Tesla, to an auto drive Tesla.
Well, okay, so the IMAET system, of course, has many different programs on it. You know, there's 25 at the moment. There's a couple more coming. So what's so cool about it is that, you know, you do two things. First, you take a scan or a measurement, and then you immediately turn around and you use that information and you turn it around into a feedback, and you address the disharmonies that have come out in the scan and harmonize them. And that's, you know, that's what's so wonderful about it, especially so it allows you to communicate with the immune system, for example. So as you know, these tests are very, let's say you have a chronic Epstein-Barr virus infection, which 90% of the population have.
I was just going to say, yeah, let's just say you had a chronic EBV infection. Let's just say that was happening.
And unfortunately, neither Pfizer nor Merck have come out with a vaccine yet for that. So we're stuck with the immune system. So we can tell the immune system, we can focus it on eliminating that very virus, okay, Epstein-Barr, which has a different frequency than corona, which has a different frequency than the flu virus, the ordinary flu virus, and so on. And so it's like a language, you know. What I've developed or I'm still developing, is a language to communicate with the body and give it direction. Because the fact of the matter is, you're speaking about your immune system for a moment. Your immune system is just trying to keep you alive right now at the moment. There's all kinds of germs flying around, and toxins need to be detoxified, and so on and so forth. It's very busy just keeping you alive right now. That Epstein-Barr virus that you picked up in college, 20, 30 years ago, is not on a front burner of your immune system. In fact, it just keeps it under wraps. But it does damage, you know, it does damage to the thyroid, it causes cancer over the decades. And so how do you get rid of it? Well, it's very easy. You focus the immune system on, you remind it, okay, I know you're very busy. However, right now, I'd like you to also pay attention and get rid of this Epstein-Barr, because we have thyroid issues, we have fibromyalgia, we have fatigue, we have all this, potentially even cancer. We need to get rid of this virus. And that's how you can do it. You know, you just dial it into the treatment, and in the case of chronic infections like that, you have to repeat it a few times. One treatment won't get rid of a virus that's been there for 30 years, you know? Yeah.
And thank you so much for that. The EBV thing is, you explained it so well. And I think that, you know, it's a stress reduction device, and there's stresses in the body the immune system can't even address. The way I have looked at bioregulatory medicine, energetic fields, is that the body has the ability to juggle 17 balls, we'll say, right? That's its job. That, you know, but when you look at blood work, you're just looking to see how well it's doing that job of juggling however many balls, but you have no idea how many balls or what balls it's juggling. You just know that it's doing a good job. When you delve into the energetic field, when quantum physics with muscle response testing, live blood analysis, CRT, heart rate variability, you start to be able to say, hey, I know what balls they're juggling and how many, so that we know that they're not overwhelmed. But I think what has really slapped me in the face in the last 24 years is how incredibly resilient the Homo sapien organism really is. How much we put up against it, and it still continues to thrive, and it still continues. Like, you know, I grew up right close to where Dr. Straile lives, 2 hours west in southern tier of New York. And breakfast was Cocoa Pebbles oftentimes in my house, or Count Chocula or something that I would like cringe if somebody gave that to my 8-year-old. But my parents didn't know any better, blah, blah, blah. They did the best they could, not throw my parents on the bus. It just was what it was. But, you know, people say all the time, I've heard this a lot in the 20 years, 25 years I've been doing this medicine, that they go, oh yeah, but I'm fine. You know, I ate just like that. And look at me, I'm fine. I'm like, but 1 in 2 men get cancer and 1 in 3 women get cancer. Like, how are you fine? Like, I don't think people are aware of how chronically sick they are and how much their immune system is working and how much their immune system is plagued with that it can't see until you look at all this regulatory bioenergetic testing. And waiting for symptoms to occur is waiting too long in my estimation. And beautiful technology that you have created in the IMAET allows us to be so proactive to allow us to see what the body's up against, even when we feel amazing, and let alone if we feel sick. And I think that's such a distinction to be made, much like you made the distinction earlier of cellular communication versus nervous system communication. If you're waiting to get sick and then do something about your health, this is probably not the greatest approach for you, because it's going to take a long time and it's going to be uphill swimming for you education wise. If you understand what we're talking about, this is your best proactive approach you got. Like, I heard about the IMAET system. I knew about allergy elimination technologies and muscle response testing for 20 years. I've watched the miracles that it creates. And I couldn't have the bandwidth. And then I interviewed Dr. Carolyn Flannery on, I literally got off the podcast, was like, thanks, Carolyn. Now I got to buy the IMAET and figure out how to use it, because that was amazing. And every family, I firmly believe every family should own one of these. And you've made them so affordable, which we also appreciate, both as a practitioner as well as personal use, because we need to be our own healthcare practitioners. And that's what Dr. Straile gives so many people the capacity to do. You can become a wellness practitioner. You can learn actually about bioenergetics. You can scan your family, scan yourself. And sometimes you definitely need a practitioner. I find even our clients that have purchased IMAETs, they still have appointments with Ian for IMAET sessions for various reasons. Maybe they don't understand some of the science behind it, or they just want his take, his intuition. He's very intuitive. Exactly. To know where to head. But the ability to have control and see what even the body can't see, because you're reading the energetics, and waking the body up to the static noise that's in the background, is just, I'm grateful, and you're brilliant. And we're just, I hope that people much more understood today what energetics and quantum field is all about, that it's the physical and the vibrational coming together, where, as Dr. Straile said earlier, where life meets. So I want you to unpack whatever you want to unpack, but I felt compelled to say that, because I never have, I mean, bioregulatory medicine has given me the gift of knowing how to handle my life and knowing what my body's up against and giving me control over my health. I feel like the IMAET is like the Cliff Note version to reading the whole book. Like, I don't need to know as much as I studied for 23 years if I just have this tool, which is why I feel like every family, you don't need to know everything. You just have the right tool to find out where these disharmonies are, harmonize them, optimize them, and watch your life soar and watch you get healthier and healthier. I mean, this man's 70 years old. And as you heard, he's still developing his equipment that he's been working on for 20 years, which is already brilliant and amazing.
Oh yeah, there's no end to it. It never stops. Yeah. So, you know, with the IMAET, you can balance your chakras. You can do treatments, which would be acupuncture type of treatments. That panel is incredible. It's, you know, the acupuncturists all tell me it's better than needles, and so on and so forth. So 25, 26 different panels. But what's also, there's another phenomenon that's worth mentioning, and that is that, so in a professional setting, we put this harness on people to measure physically their meridians, right? The chi energy in their meridians, which I look at as which is cellular communications. However, there's also a phenomenon called the body biofield. So we have, so there's another version of a model of the IMAET called the IMAET Virtuoso, which has no hardware to it. It completely operates in metaspace, and it does the same thing without physical connection. So wherever there's energy flow, right, like in these meridians, there is a perpendicular electromagnetic field around it, which is, you know, like in the case of electricity, for example, it can be damaging, you know. But anywhere, you know, if there's water flowing under your house, you have this electromagnetic field that goes perpendicular up into your house, which often is not so great energetically. And so wherever there's energy, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what kind, there is an electromagnetic field that represents that energy. So this chi energy has the same thing. So there's a field, a body biofield around our bodies that goes out an average of 6 feet, okay, measurable. Okay, some people have a little more, some people have less. But it actually connects us to, ultimately to the universe, but at least to each other, right, on this planet. And this technology can interact with this field and sense the same thing as you would do with the hardware. So you can assess somebody either 3 feet away or 3,000 miles away and do exactly the same thing: scan, assess, and do a treatment right away. And
okay, so we got to unpack that, because that's, so what, and please explain, do we use the internet for this, Dr. Straile? Is that how we access this information?
No, it has nothing to do with the internet. It's the internet is your meridian system in the body. That's the only the only reference to the internet. No, it's metaspace, and it's quantum energy, which is you know, the best way to, the simplest way to explain it is that we know that electrons, for example, are, you know, they're not stable. They're not in one place. They're in multiple places at the same time. The only thing that's steady is the protons, which is the physicalness of an atom, right? And so that's how we are interconnected. And I mean, it's the phenomenon that's been around forever, you know. Used to be, there's a thing in the psychology, a specialty called telepathy, and you know, we've known about this forever. I mean, those are phenomena that people have testimonials for a long time. But this is actually, you know, you can verify, you know, like after treatment. So how do you do? Or, you know, I mean, you can balance somebody's brain waves with the IMAET in metaspace, you know, like an autistic kid that's banging his head on the wall, and the parents are just don't know what to do. They're ready to go to the emergency room, and it's in the middle of the night, and you do a treatment and you run the brainwave balancing panel, and you can see which, you know, it's I think it's usually the beta waves, and you calm that down, and it's instant, you know. This I've had it happen more than once, for sure. So anyway, it's we are connected, and this energy is everywhere, and it's and we can reach it without physical connection.
And as beautiful as that sounds in theory, let's talk about how that happens, because that was one of my biggest questions was, Ian, how does it find me? How does it find Kelly Kennedy? Like, how does it know? How do you know you're scanning me and not Kelly Ann Kennedy versus Kelly Marie Kennedy, which I'm sure there's one of out there. So like, how does it find you? Can you explain that a little bit? Well,
you know, I mean, there's one phenomenon that's part of all of this in general, and that's intent. So if everybody's intent is on the same page, you can probably resist that. Like if the receiving party is resistant, I'm not entirely sure, but I think they can just block this from happening. But if they're willing and open, or at least at sleep, sleeping is always good, because we're not working with their conscious mind, we're working with their subconsciousness. So as far in reality, what we do, well, there is a name that identifies you there. So the more information, we just put that into the system in the beginning, the address where you are actually physically located. One of the best identifier an individual is a picture of your head, your face. Your face is very unique, and just ask the Chinese government, they'll tell you. And so we just import a picture, and that's a great identifier, even for animals. Even for, for animals, we like to do the entire body, but yes, a picture
that
of the
gives
person.
them now essentially you're measuring that frequency, or you're finding that frequency rather for that person with that picture, and what that measurable is, going back to what we were talking about earlier, that measurable mathematic frequency that's unique to me. Even if I had a twin sister that lived next door to me and we traveled around the world together, it would find her versus me because of an identifier that's different than my frequency versus her frequency.
Yeah. Well, you're still thinking physically here a little bit, even if you have an identical twin, the only time that would be a problem potentially if you were just sitting right next to each other within each other's energy field. Then that could potentially be a problem, because you can, there's a phenomenon of stealing a treatment, siblings sometimes do that. I always send the siblings out of the treatment room for the treatment phase, and so on. Sometimes even the husbands I send out and say, okay, it's time for you to kind of wait in the waiting room. But usually mothers, it's rarely an issue because they would, sacrifice themselves for their children. So that's not that big a problem. But anyway, yeah. But as far as the universe, let's say, identifying you as an individual, that's pretty straightforward.
So one of the things, and are you okay on time? Because I have about maybe 10, 15 more minutes worth of questions.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, good. So one of the things you talked about earlier was that these become functional changes, that when you're changing the frequency in the gene, they become functional changes. So the matter changes, right? And I'm sure you're familiar with Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I've done a fair amount of his techniques, his meditations and so forth. And I'm actually going to be in an advanced retreat with him next week. And one of the things that I was reminded of in taking some of his prerequisite classes is just that concept that the thought life and the frequencies that we're signaling, that we're sending out, actually can change our DNA, which changes the output, continues to change the output of frequency, which changes what's sent back to us from a matter. In regards to the IMAET, I was trying to explain this earlier as the Cliff Notes, but that might not be the right analogy. It's like, I feel like I cheat when I have the IMAET. I feel like it's a great cheating mechanism to overcome so much that my physical mind can't necessarily do, that the body can just handle, much like when you're in meditation and you're just feeling a feeling. Because what you said a few minutes ago was your intention is what matters. And if you decide to block that therapy, you might not get that therapy. Or if two siblings are in the room, one sibling might take the therapy because they're a little more energetically strong, but they're so energetically similar that it might send it to them and captured by the other person. Can you expand upon that at all in your understanding of what I'm talking about, or have I lost you?
Well, no. Let me try to explain it from this angle. So because you're absolutely right, you could look at it as cheating, but it's like when you drive your Tesla from Pennsylvania to Atlanta, is that cheating? Should you still be walking, or should you still be riding on horseback? I mean, that's,
cheating in a good way. No,
right.
I'm just trying to explain it's a real shortcut.
Right. Theoretically, every person could heal themselves if they would have the discipline and the knowledge and would meditate every day for hours on it and focus on all these things that need to be focused on. It is possible. Just like it is possible as a practitioner and has been done forever, especially, for decades that I'm aware of. There's a couple of names that come to mind, which like Andy in British Columbia some years ago. So you can do the same healing just with your mind over long distance, for example. And it works. I mean, it's been documented over and over again. But the point is, you know, you cannot do only so many cases in one day because it takes a lot of concentration and a lot of energy. So maybe you can do possibly 2-3 people a day. The beauty about the IMAET is that you can get this detailed information without even thinking, just by pushing a button and just waiting 3 minutes and say, wow, I didn't know I had this virus, and you know, and I better do something about this and that and the other thing, without having to spend all this energy and time and focus on just getting the information, and then doing the treatment phase. It's even more energy, you know. It's just, it would eat up your entire day. You couldn't do anything else. You wouldn't even have time to make dinner, or energy rather to make dinner. You know.
Yeah, I totally agree. So the functional changes that can be made can be faster because you're using the shortcut. You're not cheating. You're using the shortcut of technology. You know, I mean, one of the things that I am privy to is that, especially when I go to Baden-Baden, Germany, when MediWeek is available to us again someday, we're taking ancient wisdom and combining it with modern technology to achieve miracles, essentially, with healing capacities, because the innate intelligence of the body is ridiculously wise, and we just have to get out of the way and turn it on. But it's so busy in modern day life with trying to keep up with everything we're throwing at it. And I'm not just talking about the physical. I want to unpack the emotional component. We kind of scratched we briefly mentioned it way earlier into the podcast, but I know one of the 2 things that stuck out for me when I learned about the IMAET system was, I love you so much for this, that your 4 foundational part of your show method, I believe, and I could be wrong about this, but you start with the brain body kind of function, and then you go right into the lymphatics, because you can get anywhere in the body from the lymphatics. As a lymph queen, I so appreciate you saying that and knowing that that is how your system is oriented. I was like, oh, I'm so in, because you're documenting how much there's an issue with lymph. So could you talk about lymph a little bit? And then can you talk about the emotional components to life and how the IMAET handles the emotional components? Because I think these 2 pieces are what really Ayn and I here at the True Wellness Center have, quote unquote, specialized in for years, is the emotional components and the lymphatics. And your tool has only allowed elevation of us having the ability to help people with those 2 pieces. So take it away, Dr. Straile.
Well, okay. Well, these are, you know, vast subjects. So as far as the lymph system is concerned, of course, it's just an alternate circulatory system, you know, outside of the blood circulation. So, and it's not pumped by the heart. It's moved by, basically, let's say, muscle action, right? Movement. That's why movement is so important, and that's why exercise is always part of any kind of, especially mild or moderate exercise, of any system, you know, maintenance system for good health. And basically, the lymph is basically interstitial fluids, you know, that are outside the cells, between the cells and the blood vessels themselves. And so they contain a lot of everything, a lot of toxins, a lot of debris, dead viruses, you know, autophagy, which is dead cells, basically. They all need to be cleaned up. And a lot of that stuff happens, swims around in this interstitial fluid. And the lymph collects that and transports a lot of that, and including excess fat, you know, like triglycerides. So yeah, the lymph system is very busy, and how much attention do we pay to it, really? Not that much. So it's just as important as the regular circulatory system. And as far as, so the IMAET, of course, pays attention to it on multiple levels. One is, you know, as far as the immune system is concerned, that's very much, the lymph system is part of the immune system big time, but so is the liver, so is the bone marrow, and you know, the immune system is everything. It's our essence, really. It keeps us alive. All we have to do is nurture ourselves, and the rest is done by the immune system pretty much. So the spleen is part of the lymphatic system, right? So the lymphatic page on the IMAET system is awesome. Every single lymph node in your body is represented. Okay, so a lot of times, you know, when you have these cancers, right, they start in a lymph node in a lung, for example, and then if you catch it early on, then the surgeons come in and they cut it out, and that's pretty brutal surgery right there. So one of the wonderful things about the IMAET system is the fact that, you know, there's over 70,000 frequencies. So you can send energy, very specific energy, not only to each lymph node in there, which there's, I don't know how many, a couple of hundred at least.
Between 600 and 1,000 humans have 600,000 lymph nodes. Go ahead.
Really? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And then, but you can also send energy to specifically, let's say, to places in your inner ear or in your eyes or places you cannot get to. You know, even your eustachian tube, my eustachian tube was blocked for a couple of years and it drove me nuts. And I even considered a surgical solution, and I was investigating. I said, what can I do? I'm ready to put a stent in there or anything. And there's nothing you can do surgically, medically. So what I'm saying is so what it was is a chronic viral infection. This happened to be the mumps virus, which apparently was in my body right in that area all my life, since childhood. And so you could focus the immune system on a very specific place, like the eustachian tube, to help clear it out, and in this case, get rid of an infection, which then got rid of the blockage that was there from just the infection, yeah, the swelling and so on. So that's the lymph. What was the other topic? Oh, emotion. Oh my goodness. Well, we need to do another session for that. Yeah. So I basically categorize emotions into three categories. One is if it comes up in the in the allergen profile on the IMAET system, which is kind of the workhorse of just assessing the metabolism right at this moment, which, by the way, will be totally different than an hour from now, or totally different than at, let's say it's 12 noon now. Well, at 12 midnight, your body is doing totally different things than it's doing right now. And if you hook yourself up to the IMAET, or if you run a scan on the IMAET, you can see that. So then the thing about what I tell my patients is about when they see, you know, oh, this emotion came up in the scan very high up. It's like emotions are normal, you know. It's just because it came up doesn't mean it needs to be treated or something. Most emotions are normal, and of course, people have emotions. So the trick is, or the challenge is, to determine, is it a problem? Is it interfering with anything, you know, any functional pathways in your brain or in your system anywhere? And if that's the case, then it needs to be addressed. And there's a simple address, just putting it into the treatment and making it part of the treatment. Or sometimes the trauma is so severe that it needs a separate treatment altogether. And there's all different kinds of emotional techniques to do. As you know, Ian does some of these very, very well. And sometimes you have to do that. You know, you have to visualize certain things just to move them literally from one area in the brain, because you can't get rid of these things, but you can store them somewhere else. You can move them in an area where it doesn't interfere with metabolism or immune function or just life, you know.
Well, you did that very well and very quickly. I appreciate that. I did not expect them to be so concise, but what stands out to me in my 24 years in this industry is that, as much as I love physical medicine and needles and injections and IVs and blood work and tangible, provable, empirical based data, I have come to realize that for somebody to really heal, they've got to be connected with themselves. As you were saying, I don't remember if that was on or off camera at this point, but that people are just in general very disconnected from how their body even feels. And we see that in body awareness all the time on the Flow Prezzo. We're like, how is your calf muscle? And it takes them a minute to process that. And a whole cycle has gone through of the compression before it gets back to their calf, before they can sometimes answer that. And it's really key for me to help people understand that the attention, the focus that we give ourselves, the use the word compassion, but self-care, use some other word. I can't remember what it is right now, just a few minutes ago, in regards to caring for ourselves and let the immune system do the rest. Like, just give ourselves that care is self-love, and love creates a frequency that's absolutely beautiful. And going back to Master Emoto's work, like, Emoto proves that with microscopes, with water crystals, that if you say love words, you've got synergistic, beautiful, symmetrical, gorgeous crystals. And if you say ugly words, then the frequency is going to be what I would call mutated. And I think that's what, if you could talk about that or speak about that in your.
Well, yeah, I mean, the only thing I want to add to that is that we're made up of 70% water, and water holds energy. It's one of the mediums that hold energy, right? There's other substances that do that too, like little sugar pellets and things of that nature. But water is an incredible host of frequencies, good or bad, and so it's very important to so the 70% water in our bodies is part of this whole system of challenge of good health and positive emotions and positivity in general, and just plain good health, So, however, so let me backtrack just a moment about the emotions, okay? Because then that all plays into that. The water is really just a medium. It's sort of semi-passive. Whatever you put in it is what it's going to hold. So if you put a lot of crap in it and a lot of negative energy, that's what it's going to hold. If you do the opposite, then you're much better off. And but when it comes to emotions, there's a big component to it, which I usually, unless there's some traumatic, there's certain traumas that are so severe they need to be dealt with separately. But let's say anxiety is a big issue these days. It always has been, but it's really over the top at these days. A lot of these mental issues in particular, they're operated by neurotransmitters and hormones and such, and they again are managed by tons of different genes. And so let's say you have someone has an anxiety issue, and there's an underlying biochemical imbalance because of certain genes that don't function properly, whether it's dopamine related or serotonin related or GABA related or even acetylcholine related. All the therapy and everything in the world is not going to have the expected result. It's going to be very difficult, While if you first balance or harmonize the underlying biochemical imbalances in the metabolism of these neurotransmitters, you have a much better chance of, these things are much easier to deal with and to remedy.
And the panels on the IMAET, like you keep talking, there's 25 panels essentially. Can you just explain the panels, particularly from the emotional component? And like, are there only negative emotions, or do you treat positive emotions?
Well, funny you should ask that. So, one thing that's fascinating about the IMAET and the technology and which is just mirrors life in general, is the boxes we're in. You know, you really have to loosen up your mind about judgment and about what you think you knew, and emotions is one of these things, right? So there's a neuro-emotional panel there, which is more emotions that are related to physical pain, you know, like your back hurts and things like that, your neck pain, and just certain physical pains that are mostly related to emotional issues. And on that panel, what I learned is that, so there's things on there like jealousy and greed, and so the entire system of the IMAET is set out and organized to achieve balance, right? So extreme highs are bad and extreme lows are not desirable. You want to be in the middle. If everything functions somewhere in the middle, everything is pretty good. So the same is true for emotions. So now you're doing a scan and jealousy or greed comes up extremely low. You know, you say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, is there a situation where there's not enough jealousy or not enough greed? And over time, then, you know, I kind of sort these things out with muscle testing and kinesiology, and the body says, yes, I want to be treated for greed and jealousy. And I say, geez, how is that possible? That doesn't make, you know, and I realized that my value system is just, it needs to expand. That greed is not just bad and jealousy is not just bad. Everything needs to be in balance, even those things that we associate as negative. Okay. And that it's a big lesson to learn to be less judgmental and just let the energy be where it needs to be, which may not always jive with what we have learned so far in life.
What society has taught us.
Right.
The concept of right or wrong, good and bad, you know, but the energy just is, right? That's what we know, is that energy just is. It's not positive, it's not negative, it just functions.
Yeah, exactly. Right at this time in history, they're teaching us with overwhelming force that the only way forward with this virus is vaccination. And I happen to not agree. I happen to think that we need to let immunity take place, and it's part of evolution. It's important to let that happen for long-term health of us, of everybody.
I absolutely 100,000%, 1,000,000% exponentially times 1,000,000% infinity agree with you.
Yeah. Of course, I was digressing. I apologize.
No, it's perfectly fine. I mean, my audience is very aware of how I feel about that whole concept, because I look at viruses as the solution to, you know, like, we're an ecosystem, the world's an ecosystem, it's a microcosm and the macrocosm. I do a lot of live blood analysis, so I am very aware that we are part of a universe, because inside our body is a universe, and things change and grow and things show up as a solution. Like, I don't know if anybody's watching me, but this week and in the beginning of the podcast, I was like working on my jaw. I've been looking at myself on Zoom this whole week and noticing that there's something going on over here that I don't feel any symptoms of. I've just noticed in looking at myself talking that it almost feels like one of my trigeminal nerve branches isn't like being triggered over here. And so I just literally went into Ian right before this and said, hey babe, can you run that on the IMAET and see what shows up? Because I don't know what it is. You know, it's an awareness that I have. I don't know where I was going with that, but it's like, there's just so much out there to understand about ourselves and about life. And this is showing me there's something going on in my body, and I just need to start paying attention to it and figure it out. It's not that it's bad. It's trying to compensate for something that's going on in my body. And I'm noticing a symptom, which means, hey, can I give you an assist somehow, an energetic assist from the IMAET, and send you some frequencies to clear up whatever this is?
Well, in order to learn, first you have to become aware. So what the IMAET does is it makes you aware of what actually is going on. It makes you aware of what's in the air, not because it measures it, but because it observes the body dealing with it. So if the farmers are spraying weed killer, you know, whatever it's called, herbicides on the fields in April and May, I can see it in the IMAET. In fact, Well, it's just amazing, you know, all these things you become aware of. So up here we've had like an early the earliest spring ever, and the trees are already budding. And you know, I don't have so much time observing what the trees are doing, but then I ask people. I run a scan, and tree pollen comes up in January. It's never come up any earlier than late February. You know, and I say, it can't be possible. I mean, tree pollen. Oh yeah, the trees have been budding because we had like 2 weeks of like temperatures in the 60s, you know, where it's supposed to be freezing. And okay, and the weed killers the farmers are spraying, you can see it in the skin, makes you aware of it. So now that you're aware of it, you can learn, you know, and you can, in this case, learn how to teach the body and how to deal with these things and improve its functions, detoxification, and otherwise.
It's really amazing. I appreciate so much your time, Dr. Straile, and I just want to make everybody aware of how to find you, knowing all the ways and resources and access that they have to. So Dr. Straile teaches the show method. He teaches it to lay people as well as practitioners, correct?
Yes.
Yep. And the show method does not necessarily need to have the IMAET attached to it, the immune modulation allergen elimination technology rather, that he created. But it would definitely make it a little easier to employ that. And you certify people as wellness coaches, correct?
Right. We have in the beginning of February 5 and 6, we have a certification seminar coming up. And in May, you just go on a website and click on the webinar or the training tab, and you can see all the different events.
We'll put a little link down here. It's IMAET.com, but we'll put a link in for you.
Right.
Yeah. What were you going to say?
Well, I've lost it.
Okay, it's gone. It wasn't that important, must be. So, yeah, I think I just want everybody to know about the show method, the wellness coaching training that you do to certify people as wellness coaches, and that it's, you know, if anybody has any questions, Ian does some workshops here in our office as well to teach people about IMAET. We haven't had one in a couple months. I just wrote down a note when we were talking that we need to put that in the schedule. But if you are interested to learn more about the IMAET, reach out to our office, reach out to Dr. Straile. There's a lot of videos on YouTube as well that you can learn about it. And we so appreciate it. I have one last question for you and I'll let you go.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of my podcast, I like to ask my colleagues and my friends, in all your 70 beautiful years that you've been on this planet in the world of bioenergetics, but it doesn't have to be necessarily in regards to wellness, but what is the one quote unquote secret that you've learned that you would like to give out to the world? If you had the capacity to have a microphone and have all 7.6 billion people listen to you today, what would be the secret you want them to know?
Oh boy. Well, there is a lot of them. Right now, I would, I can only go back so far. Maybe I would like to share the most recent one because that's the one I can remember.
Sure.
So all my life, I've been wondering and I've been pondering in my mind, like, why did God create viruses? Like, what are they good for? Why is there viruses? They're not good for nothing. All they do is plague us, cause us problems. And it's been kind of something I've asked myself many, many, many times. So finally, the last 2 years have taught me. I finally understand, and I've done a lot of research, in the virus department over the last 2 years, that they actually have a purpose. They have a purpose. In fact, they are embedded in our DNA. They are part of evolution. They challenge our very survival, and the way it works is it's happening right now that we have to be able to deal with them, and in this case develop some sort of an immunity for them, and they become sort of part of our DNA. Okay, you'll find that as you, and again, the IMAET can show that, that certain illnesses that your forefathers had, previous generations, they are buried in your DNA, and they're still an issue. And sometimes you do have to change it and get rid of it. They used to call it miasms, right? Way back when. Mm-hmm. They're basically predispositions, but so anyway, it's sort of a secret, but it's for real. It's for real. There's, even viruses have a purpose. They're not just menacing us.
It's like the hormesis, the concepts in science of, in order for an organism or a life to expand, you have to apply pressure for it to expand, or it will contract and it will die. And hormesis is the pressure, and viruses represent this pressure that allow us to expand, create and adapt the immunity, and then become part of us. So it's like an upgrade. Dr. Zach Bush, I don't know why I always want to call him Jack for some reason. Dr. Zach Bush, I don't know if you follow his work at all, but that's what he's been bringing and spouting from the mountains for 2 years, is the virus is the answer to an evolutionary upgrade. And
there you go. So somebody else is realizing the same thing. Good.
100%. Shocking that it would be brilliant and empirical based data evidence doctors that get that. Shocking. Well, you have been a delight today on many levels, and not that I was so looking forward to this interview, but we went to areas that I never could have asked you to go to, but I was so happy you went to, and help people understand and give them confidence. And you've given them tools as well that they can use in their home for their own wellness. And we are so grateful to you, Dr. Straile, for all your work and your continued work that you pour in. Your devotion to this world, to humanity, is very much understood from mine and Ian's and Carolyn's and so many of our perspectives. And we are very grateful to you.
Yeah. Well, let me just say that one thing I don't want people to be afraid of is the complexity of this. It's all very complex. I know that, and it's a fact. But the software makes it very understandable and very manageable, and anybody can learn it. It's easy to do.
Yeah, and
easier than you may think.
No, and I want to say to my statement earlier, the only reason I wasn't going to take the IMAET on is because I have about 7 companies I'm running right now. And it's not that it's a complicated, it's just I don't have the time to put into it. But after today's podcast, I was literally like, okay, I got to find time in my schedule to play with the IMAET. I'm ready to go play with the IMAET. So yes, it's not from complication. It's from literally lack of time and knowing that I have an amazing partner that has the ability to put in the time and the devotion into that, and has soared to the mountains with his IMAET. And yeah. I'm very appreciative of that, as are all the clients that have taken advantage of Ian and his new technology that he's so excited about. So any other parting words that you want to share?
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you all today for spending your time and for listening. And if this does resonate with you, please share this, hit the notification button so you know when the Beats is on next. And as always, from our heart, truly to yours, we thank you for your time today. We pray that this is beginning the enlightening journey of wellness as it is for you. And we look forward to hearing all your comments and your suggestions, and we'll see you next time on the Beats. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us and spending your time here with us at the Beats with your host, Kelly Kennedy. And I know today more than ever before, you now know better how your body works. And at the very least, we hope we've helped you raise some questions and help you continue to investigate. We are here to help you naturally optimize a better version and vision of yourself on every single level. And after today, you can better engage your innate intelligence and allow for proper regulation and proper regeneration. Make sure to subscribe to never miss a beat again. We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. And just a reminder that this podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or professional advice and care by your doctor or other qualified medical professionals. This podcast is created with the intention to provide information and education. This podcast is created with the understanding that it does not constitute professional advice or medical services. If you are looking for help in your journey and seek a qualified medical practitioner, or if you're looking for a biological, not meds practitioner, we can help you. Someone who's trained and a licensed health coach and someone that can help you make changes, especially when it comes to your health. That's what Not Meds mission is about. I hope you have enjoyed listening again to this podcast. It's one of my favorite things to do. And if you do, please feel free to share it with your friends, your colleagues, for the tips of living the biological foundational life and living in the flow. And if you have been listening and love the show, please do leave comments. We love reading your comments. We really do. And you can subscribe to us wherever you hear your podcast. Thank you so much from our heart to yours.